So my name is Diane Carlisle, and I am on staff here at Epiphany, and I had the pleasure of serving as one of the people who helped to call our Bishop, Phil LaBelle, as our next Bishop of Olympia. And up here with me, I have four other people from Epiphany, or three other people from Epiphany who were vitally important in the calling of the bishop on the diocesan level. So over to my far left is Tieran Sweeny-Bender, who was co-chair of the search committee, which was the committee that started the work, and they'll explain about it more. Also, Mike Simmons was on that committee as well, and their work was what got us to where we are today. Their initial work, we wouldn't have the bishop we have now if it hadn't been for the search committee finding a wonderful slate of nominees. And over to my near left is Eleanor Nelson, who was the co-chair of the transition committee. So that meant they started the work after the search committee concluded theirs, and I also was a member of that transition committee. And so we're going to go through the calling of a bishop. What does that mean? But I thought I'd start by actually figuring out, where does a bishop fit in the Anglican Communion, and what is the Anglican Communion? And hopefully I know how to do this. Maybe I don't. There we go. So I'm going to do a brief outline of the Episcopal Church, just kind of our polity, how it is that we're put together. So the Episcopal Church, it used to be called the Episcopal Church of the USA. It is now just called the Episcopal Church because we have people who live outside the United States that are part of it. We're a member of the Anglican Communion, which is the third largest Christian communion in the world. So we have the Catholic Communion, the Orthodox Communion, and the Anglican Communion. Those are the three biggest communions of the Christians. And within this Anglican Communion worldwide, there are 42 anonymous churches, and churches meaning the bigger church. So the Episcopal Church is one of those 42, and over 85 million members worldwide. It was formally founded in 1867. Now, that is not when the Church of England was founded, but that was when the Anglican Communion was founded. They said, hey, we have like theology, like beliefs. We're going to kind of come together and try to meet consensus on certain things. And then we get down to the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church has 9 provinces. That's 9 geographic areas that are part of it. There are 96 dioceses, yes, in the U.S. and 10 that are in other countries. So together that makes up the Episcopal Church. We are led by a presiding bishop, which currently is Michael Curry, but next week will become Sean Rowe. You can watch his investiture and ordination on Saturday, I believe. In the Episcopal Church, we have 280 bishops, give or take. And because once you're a bishop, you're always a bishop. So some of these 280 are retired. That brings us down to our diocese. We live in the Diocese of Olympia, and that's one of 2 dioceses, I cannot say that word, in Washington State. We also have the Diocese of Spokane, which is on the other side of the mountains, and it also takes in part of Idaho. There's around 100 churches, again, give or take. Around 31,000 parishioners in the year 2020. And just one other little thing, I'm going to go back a second. In 2022, which is the last year that I can find numbers for, in the Episcopal Church in our particular church, there were 1,584,785 people. So that's in the United States plus those other 10 provinces. And so where does that leave us in the Diocese of Olympia? Well, we have a bishop. A bishop is the one who leads the diocese. Technically, he is Deut's boss, or she. In the history of the Diocese of Olympia, it's always been a he. So Greg Rickel was our past bishop, and he announced his resignation in 2022. Yes?
I wouldn't say he was my boss. No. I mean, honestly, the vestry is my boss. The bishop is my supervisor.
Oh, thank you.
Right? It's a little different, right?
Right. So Greg left us approximately December 31st. He kind of hung on and did it like a pilgrimage and some other things, but that was his effective date. And so that's when the people up here started to take over kind of the search for our new bishop. And so I'm going to let Eleanor kind of talk about what were the roles in the bishop election process.
Slides for me. Okay, so the standing committee, and basically, they kind of started this whole process. So the standing committee was in charge of electing the bishop and the committees that would, get to this final state. They set the budget. They set compensation and benefits, picked the search committee and the transition committee members. They wrote the charge for the search committee, and then the final approval of the profile and other communications that went out. And if any of you were active in looking at the diocesan website, there was so much about the whole process on that. They also had the approval of the final slate of nominees and oversaw the petition process as well as oversaw the consent process. And then there was the search committee. And so again, Mike and Tieran will go into more detail about this in a bit, but they presented the slate of nominees for the standing committee as outlined in the charge. They cared for all the applicants. They helped educate the diocese on the process of what a bishop does and worked in very confidential states. There are parts of this that I still will ask them, they go, we can't say. So they held to that. The transition committee, in which I co-chaired along with Jen Grivel, and we helped introduce the nominees. So basically, once the search committee presented the slate of candidates, so the narrowed down, we then helped to introduce this group to the diocese. We helped educate, on what the process would be and what a bishop does. The work isn't as confidential because we now have the 4 nominees, and we wanted all of you to have an opportunity to see and get involved. So we planned meet and greets all around the diocese and planned a farewell for the provisional bishop. We helped fundraise for gifts for the new bishop. We planned the electing convention. We planned the consecration and the surrounding events, and helped the bishop-elect get settled into, in this case, relocated to Seattle. We cared for all the candidates and bishop-elect, and we helped with the seating of the new bishop. And a chaplain. So the search committee nominated a chaplain, which the transition did as well. So 2 separate chaplains, but a very important role because in each of the work that we did, we wanted the groups to be grounded, and that chaplain helped with the spiritual work that we were undertaking. They served as a pastoral resource to the committees. organize prayer and worship for search committee meetings and for discernment retreat. And then they were served as a pastoral resource for the candidates at the discernment retreat. They stayed neutral during the discernment process so they can mediate or mediate any conflict. And then consultant. So I will tell you, this was our lifeblood, and I heard from Tieran and Mike also. The consultants were just literally our right hand through this entire process. So there's a consulting firm that we use that is, dioceses have the choice of using a consultant, and so we are very blessed that we had them as a resource. They provided the best practices and support for all phases of the transition. They provided resources and examples for other searches, helped recruit candidates or applicants. They can confer with other consultants for advice. They helped with red flags with finalists for the bishop, ordered the background checks, post-diocesan, what is OTM?
OTM is, they posted, I'll get into it, they posted different things that helped gather applicants.
Thank you. And then the other resource was our current provisional bishop, who doesn't necessarily have a role in the nominating process, but helped advise for the electing convention, for planning the consecration. So she joined some of my subcommittee meetings. And if there was overlap, helped to orient the bishop-elect, which there was overlap. So Melissa was able to help Phil through part of his transition process. And then people of the diocese, all of you. So praying through this entire process, sending profiles to friend and clergy, and helping to encourage to, get involved and get to know this process. Participate in focus groups, surveys, and the meet and greets. And then the convention delegates who will help delegates who were elected. So that was kind of other parts of this process, and we'll go into more detail from there. Who's next? Is it Tieran?
So now we're going to move into the search committee part of it, of which Tieran and Mike were on, and they'll walk through what they can of what the search process did.
Beautiful. So the standing committee, who functioned as when the bishop's gone, the standing committee functions as a top authority in the diocese. And so they commissioned us in the winter of 2023 to get this work started. We began with Holy Conversations and a Holy Cow survey. Holy Cow is a consulting firm that does surveys for churches in the Episcopal Church. That felt to me like a moment of pilgrimage across the diocese, learning about what people wanted in a new bishop, what their hopes and dreams were for the diocese, gaps that need to be filled. It was a chance to sort of learn more about what people were looking for. That whole process of Holy Conversation and Holy Cow surveys, which was, there was the qualitative conversations, and then the survey offers some quantitative data about what people were looking for. And one of the things that was really exciting to hear in that process was how much energy there was in the diocese. At one point, the folks who were doing the report, giving us kind of the feedback of the report, said, "You have one of the most electric dioceses we've ever met." They talked about the energy that was here, which is a really great thing when you are trying to pull in, ask someone to become a bishop. That allowed us to create a diocesan profile, and the profile is two things. It is both a description of the diocese, and so that prospective people who are considering applying for bishop can learn more about what's important to us, what our ministries are, things like that, as well as a job description of what we are looking for in a bishop. So every diocese that has an election will create a profile of some sort. The picture behind is actually one of the pictures we used for the profile itself with the mountains in it. Once that was released, the profile sort of kickstarts the application process. And so we were looking for folks from across the Anglican Communion, and that looked like people in the diocese reaching out to people they knew. It looked like our search consultants helping recommend people to reach out to. Bishops are also, people across the church were watching for when our profile came out. And we're looking for opportunities to be involved in that process of gathering applications. Once we did receive those applications, it began kind of the really confidential part of the I almost call it like a pilgrimage away from the diocese, because we couldn't share really anything from, once the profile was out, our work had to be very silent to honor the applicants and ensure that their confidentiality was respected. There was 3 sort of stages of discernment for us. There was the written stage, looking at applications. We interviewed folks on Zoom, and then began checking references and meeting people who were around those candidates. And then that culminated in a meeting in February of this year down near SeaTac Airport to meet with a smaller group of people to have some in-person time together, to meet them in person, see, just learn more about them, learn things that we couldn't learn either through a written application or across a computer screen. And that whole process of gathering applications and beginning to narrow down and discern together who we felt was called to be a candidate led us to create a slate. And one of the other things I want to lift up is that our lovely consultants often mentioned, our job was not to, of the 20 of us, pick who we wanted to become bishop. It was to create this profile and then call people who fit what the diocese was asking us and what they wanted out of a bishop. So it wasn't about I want X person or Y person or X quality or Y quality in a person. It was about who is the diocese asking us to bring forward. And so we were charged with bringing 3 to 5 candidates to the standing committee, and we lifted up 4 people. Well, on the next slide. Well, that is hard to read. I'll go left to right. On the left is Hillary Raining, who is a priest in Pennsylvania, in the Diocese of Pennsylvania, which is the Philadelphia and Philadelphia suburbs. The Venerable Jordan Haney-Ware, who is a priest in the Diocese of Edmonton up in Canada, and was also Archdeacon for Justice in that diocese. Kate, who was in Connecticut at that time and is now with us. And then LaBelle, who is now our bishop, who was in the Diocese of Massachusetts at a church about halfway between Worcester and Boston. Once we brought these candidates forward, our job really was complete. One of the reasons why I said yes to this work is basically because we were not the transition committee. So sometimes they do it as one group, even though in some ways they really are very different jobs. The search committee really is about discernment in focusing on what the diocese is looking for and going out and finding people who fit that, what the diocese is looking for, whereas transition is about, as Eleanor would say, getting the whole show on the road and getting it all together so we can have a bishop. Mike, I don't know if there's more you want to add. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I should say that the other co-chair was the Reverend Elizabeth Riley, who was in Mercer Island, is now up in Dunstan's, Dunstan, up in Shoreline. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to the fabulous co-chair of the Transition Committee. Do all the amazing work that I did not want to do.
Yeah, so this is very, very hard to read, but this is kind of the timeline of what happened after. It's not really the search beginning, it really is the transition beginning, because we first met in January of 2023, February is when the final slate of, actually, at this time, they became nominees. And then well, actually, they didn't become nominees until the joint board approved them. And then we went through our system in April, the week of April 29th, we did our meet and greets. May 18th, we did our electing convention. And then on September 14th, we did our consecration. I apologize for this being difficult to read. So Eleanor is going to go through a little bit of how the transition committee actually worked.
Yeah, so there were 19 people from across the diocese that were part of the transition committee. And some lay people, some clergy, people with different experience levels. Many of us had never been part of the process or anything even outside our own parishes, so it was quite an experience. We established team norms for the group, and as I mentioned, we elected a chaplain who was a clergy, and she just did a great job of just pulling us together at the beginning of each meeting. But the norms were critical in the work that we did of just establishing. So I will first say there were 7 subcommittees, and so much of the work that we did was just in the initial state as co-chairs was asking each person to pick 2 or 3 of these subcommittees that they felt they were called to, and then kind of making that happen. So the subcommittees were a communication committee, and just 2 people, literally, that just made everything happen as far as being on the website, coordinating with diocesan staff to ensure that we were getting the communications out for this, all the activities that were happening. So we just ended up getting 2 people who had that experience in their own professional lives, and so were very tech savvy and really good at just knowing process and learning the timeline of when we needed to get things onto the website and that process. The meet and greet planning committee, so that started the process. We had our slate of 4 candidates, and so in April, all the work we did from January to April, for the most part, was making sure that all of you got to know these candidates in the entire diocese. So the planning of that process was huge, and so the meet and greet co-chairs were Diane Carlisle and Ruth Ann Garcia. So the 2 of them, you know, had this, I don't even remember how many people on your committee, but a lot of people involved. And so just, Diane will go into more detail on that, but just a lot of work involved in, we basically paraded the slate of nominees across the diocese, starting, we had a tour bus, like a rock star bus, and we were all on that for a whole entire week, from Longview up to Bellingham, and visiting a number of parishes throughout. And then the next event was the electing convention, which was in May, and so that's then everyone has seen the nominees. They've either visited the meet and greets, or they saw them virtually, or they read information on the website. And so then, as you all know, there was an electing convention, which was quite an ordeal. So we had a co-chair with some other people who were planning that process. And I mean, and it's literally even, you know, it was at the cathedral, so it's even like parking, and we ended up renting some parking spaces from Seattle Prep down the street. And, you know, you just, amazing, all the catering, all of the things that are involved. And so then we went through that process. And I should also state, oh, I think it is one of the positions on here, but each nominee had a shepherd, which is someone from the committee that became kind of their right-hand person to make sure they got communications that we needed them to know, including getting to Seattle for the meet and greets and explaining that process, and just answering any questions and being there. Yeah, so that was a big part of the work as well. And then the other committees, after we had a bishop-elect, was then supporting the provisional bishop, because they were about to go through a transition. The diocesan staff is now going to have a new leader, and Melissa, who had been an interim for about 1.5 years, was going to be transitioning. So we did work to recognize, we had a celebration for Melissa. We supported the diocesan staff. We had many opportunities to kind of meet with them and had a luncheon with them. And then supporting the bishop-elect and their family, because now they're relocating across country. So we had a committee that helped support them. I mean, I actually just had lunch with the bishop's spouse on Friday, and she was like, it was so wonderful to have them just like, here's the moving process, we can move your car, and just someone to take care of all of that as they're trying to plan their relocation. And yeah, so we had someone, we even put together a resource list of just resources in the area in Seattle and trying to explain some of the norms of relocating to Seattle. The Consecration Ordination, another huge undertaking for a subcommittee and their chair. So, and Diane was heavily involved with that, so she'll go into all the details of that. But that was, for me as a co-chair, it was interesting to see all the powers that be doing what they do to put on this humongous, service. And they brought their expertise, from choir to plant, vergers all across. And so interesting process. And then again, the seating of the bishop, which I talked about a little bit, that was an ordeal as well. Yeah, quite a process, and it was new for me. So yeah, it was all very interesting for many of us to go through. But anyway, that's kind of what my committee did. And I will tell you, as Diane knows, so picture that each of these groups had to meet many, many, many times. And so I was on all of those meetings. And so the Zoom meetings became just like, I'd hop in and just sometimes multiples on a day. At least I was able to help kind of like, no, this committee meeting is meeting at the same time. Can you meet at a different time? So we had kind of a cadence of Zoom meetings, and anyone could participate in those. So even towards the end, after the bishop-elect, he was able to join in on the consecration meetings, and anytime we needed him there. And Melissa joined in on some of the meetings prior to that, or actually up until as well. So anyway, I'm gonna turn it over to Diane now to
So imagine, if you will, all of these committees, Eleanor attending as many as she could from January through September. That's a lot of meetings. I asked her to count and she couldn't. So that is a lot of meetings. She and Jen did just an incredible amount of work. I was on 2 of the subcommittees, and they were a lot of work, just those 2. So I cannot imagine all of the time and effort that Eleanor put in to do that. So one of the things we were tasked with doing once we had this slate of nominees from the search committee was to introduce them to the diocese. And so we went on a tour bus, and it did feel like we were rock stars, or at least we were the paparazzi or the people that came along with them. And so we went to 5 open meet and greets throughout the diocese. And I have to say, that was one of the most difficult decisions, is deciding where to go so that we could actually share the nominees with the most amount of people. And so we started down in Longview at St. Stephen's in Longview, trying to draw the southern part of the diocese. We went to St. Mary's in Lakewood, which is around the Tacoma area, and we did a side one, which is where this picture was taken at Church of the Holy Family, which is a Cambodian church in the Tacoma-ish area. And this was for just basically the people from the Circles of Color group. Then we went to Grace on Bainbridge to get kind of the peninsula and people from Seattle who wanted to travel over there. But if they didn't want to travel over there, the people of Seattle could go to St. Thomas and Bellevue because we did one over there. We also did one here at Epiphany for clergy so that they could kind of have their own time with the nominees. And we ended up at St. Paul's in Bellingham. And so we kind of went south to north with a little venture to the west. And then, so we were at St. Mark's. We met this diocesan staff, and this is actually on the roof of D House that picture was taken. So they have kind of a nice place where they can kind of sneak in.
They made us stare into the sun for like 10 minutes. Oh, that's smart. They'd be like, close your eyes, no.
And then this picture, I was fortunate to be able to ask the questions. They wanted one person to ask the questions in every place, so that was me. And so this is at Grace asking Phil one of the questions. So we went through that. That was 5 days of just running all over the place. And then that culminated on May 18th with the electing convention. And that was at the cathedral, and you can see some of your delegates there. I think Dwight took that picture, so he's not in it. These are, when we have our elections for delegates to diocesan convention, these are the people that you elected, and so they were the ones that represented you in the votes. It took 4 ballots to come to reach consensus, or general consensus. We had to have a majority of lay people and a majority of clergy vote for the same person. So that was kind of almost all day. I was going to say ordeal, but that's not what it was. It was it was a wonderful time to be together with other people in the diocese, and we did end up electing Phil LaBelle as our next bishop. And then I got to step back a little bit because then it was that whole transition of finding a place for Phil to live and figuring out how to close his ministry with the congregation in Massachusetts where he was coming from. But then we really started talking about the consecration, and the consecration was at Maidenbauer Center, which is a convention center in Bellevue. It is not a beautiful church. It's a little bit stark, and it's big. It's really big. And the Consecration Committee, I give a lot of credit to the people who put this committee together because there were so many parts. There was all of the rooms and things that had to be done at Maidenbauer Center had to be booked, what was going on in which place, and how many tables did we need, and this sort of thing. And then there was the hotels, booking the hotels and all the food. We provided meals for a lot of people over Friday and Saturday. Somebody else took care of that. Somebody else took care of all the music. We did expect 80 people in the choir, and 200 showed up. That was a little bit of a seating issue, but it was okay. They just wanted to be there, and Fred welcomed them. I was the local minister of ceremony, which means I worked with Ann Hallisey, who was the chaplain to our presiding bishop, to make sure that all the logistics of the liturgy went together. So that's what I did. We had our communications person who did all of the communication and collated all of the RSVPs because we had to know how many meals we had to cook. Well, we weren't cooking. How many we had to order. So there was just so much. We had somebody else who put the program together. Thankfully not me, that did the bulletins for it. And so there was just so many moving parts, and everybody had their part, and everybody did it well. Very, very functional committee. So as I said, this culminated on September 14th, and with the consecration. How many of you were able to be there? A few of you. It really was spectacular. It's on YouTube if you want to see it. I have to say, when I saw Eleanor walk in with our banner, I just started crying. The music was lovely. It was just, it was the perfect music for marching in 58 banners from around the diocese. There were 186 volunteers who took part in the service, as well as a big staff. We had over 20 bishops from all over the United States and beyond, one from the Philippines who were here to be a part of the consecration. They actually let us use incense in Maidenbower Center. We had to get a special dispensation for that. And we had lots and lots of wine and lots of bread. So there was that altar guild behind the scenes that was absolutely an integral part of putting this together. And then the actual service itself, we had a few clergy there who got to process and be there to support Phil. This is Phil during the service itself. You can see that it was so big, we had to have an escalator, which was kind of cool to come down. And then there's on the left are all the bishops that were there, and then on the right were the co-consecrating bishops. These are the people that asked the questions of Phil, and he had a choice. Two of them are Lutheran bishops. They divide their areas, provinces, whatever they're called, slightly differently from north and south, whereas we do east and west. So we had the northern and southern bishops of the Lutheran Church with us as well. And all of this is to say, we now have a new bishop. And I just want to say a little bit about this, what he's wearing. Epiphany gave a generous donation to allow this to be made specifically for Phil. So it was all custom made. I haven't seen him actually wear it. I've only seen the picture of it. So it's absolutely beautiful. I did want to say that it wasn't just the four of us that were involved from Epiphany. We had 4 people from Epiphany who sang in the choir of 200. We had 3 people from Epiphany function as vergers for the service. Bob Barnes was my co-minister of ceremony for it. We had 3 Eucharistic ministers serving, our acolytes serving, and then Eleanor carried the banner and Mike ushered. So we just had so many people from Epiphany be a part of this consecration, that it was absolutely fabulous. And if you see Phil, ask to see his pectoral cross, which you can kind of see there. It is absolutely stunningly beautiful. So we wanted to leave a little bit of time to ask questions, and Mike's going to be our expert. Carrie?
Thank you, first of all. I mean, this just looks like a tour de force. It's wonderful. What, can we expect any real change in the diocese as a result of this new leadership?
I'm sure there will be change, but we do want to give them. So we just came back from convention. So yesterday was our first convention with Phil, and I have to say he did a fabulous job. He was calm, collected. He has some visions that will probably be different than Greg's. I would think so. He's a different person, but I think that's yet to be revealed.
Well, the question is more about what, as a bishop, what do they have influence over?
I'm sorry.
Culture, what do they have influence over? I'm a newcomer to, well, I'm not a newcomer, that's not
Mike
fair.
may have some opinions.
Important.
operationally, like, there we go. The bishop, so resources and vision mostly live in parishes. And so the bishop is the pastor to priests. If there's an issue and somebody wants to complain about me and doesn't like the vestry or me, they can go talk to the bishop. But I'm not sure how the bishop's vision or administrative patterns play back into the life of the parish. Diana may have some opinions on that. Come on up. They certainly are very involved with missions. They're very involved with struggling churches. They're very involved with the property of the diocese. But for places like Epiphany and St. Mark's and St. Thomas and whatnot, they confirm people here, and they come and visit. Kate?
The influence they have on the formation and calling of people to ordination.
Yeah.
Involvement in what kind of clergy we have.
Sure, yeah, they really do, yeah.
Which would then shape the congregation.
Yeah, that the clergy are then sent into.
I think they also have, they're oftentimes the public voice of the Episcopal Church in a region. And so they're speaking about what is the Episcopal Church's take on various things. This is really important in issues of social justice and serving the poor and that sort of thing. I think also they are the crisis manager, and a lot of times that's the background stuff. So, for example, for those of you who are around, there was kind of when we began ordaining gay bishops, and partly when we began ordaining women, there were a lot of people, there were a lot of communities that had a split within their church, and so when Greg first came, there were 5 or 6 lawsuits that were going on. And so, and then also, when a priest is really struggling or not doing well, they do a lot of crisis management about that. That's very behind the scenes. It's not a very public role, but it actually is a hugely time-consuming role. And then the last piece I want to just want to say is the resources, like our what do you call it? The thing we give to them, the money that we give. Assessment. Our assessment, sorry, I just had a little brain glitch there. Our assessment pays for innovative things that the bishop wants to organize, and really it's a partnership between the bishop and our governing body. So like standing committee and the other committees that are in the board of directors, like the other committees. But what are the innovative new things that they want to seed and be able to support? And Epiphany's gotten some of these grants as well over time. So that's the other big way that resources get deployed.
They do, but I would just say, as a practical matter, from people in the pews at Epiphany, very little. Yes, Barbie?
Is there something unique about the mission of the Diocese of Olympia?
Is there something unique about the mission of the Diocese of Olympia?
Go ahead, let's take one thing first. I think one of the things that was jumped out at me in listening to the part of what was really cool about the application process, we got to hear. One of the things we asked was, why are you interested in coming to this place? Specifically, why Olympia, not just like being a bishop in general, but why coming here? And one of the things I think I was really excited to hear was sort of the combination of focus on justice, creation care, and the energy here. I mean, I think people really noticed how energetic this place being the whole diocese is. And I think that, and like, looking across the church, the combination we have of the energy to kind of focus on creation, care, and justice work, and the relative lack of conflict in our diocese, unfortunately, is unique right now in the church. And like, and I don't mean to sort of cast aspersions on other dioceses, but like, it was noticeable for us that we weren't talking about, we weren't talking about there being very recent, very big conflicts within the diocese. And there are places that we're calling bishops where that was a thing, and they needed a bishop to come in and help heal that conflict. And I think there were it's like, it was a gift for us as a search committee to not have to worry about, can we find someone who can do that communication. There's always some level of things going wrong, like a community this big as the diocese always has something not quite working. But it was notable both internally for us looking and also external folks who are coming in and observing the health here, that enabled us to really just really cast the net as wide as possible and get the Holy Spirit to bring people to us, and not sort of need a fixer, which there are times when bishops are called to be the fixer.
So getting back to Carrie's question, I think anytime you have a leader at that level, with so many people following, I think it remains to be seen. I mean, there's different styles. I'm sure Greg had his style that some were in favor of and some maybe were opposed. So I think when he gives maybe his 6-month address, what does that look like? What did he learn in those first 3 to 6 months? I think the question gets answered a little different. So I think the other thing too is Tieran talked about the profile, and the profile was fairly public. And the profile was really the diocese on paper. And it's what everyone said they wanted, what they desired in a bishop. And I suspect that profile that was for this search was different than the profile that was for Greg's search. So therein lies the change. So I think a lot of things remain to be seen, but I guess I would say we just all have to remain vigilant on our journeys, yet remain open because it's a different person. So.
I would really, really remember hearing Bishop Ripple when he first spoke, and it was a really downer feeling for me, where he was saying we should just take this ship and put it into harbor, because he was talking about how many parishes were floundering, and he was kind of doing it as a wake-up call. And I was at that convention, and I will never forget it, and I forget what year that was, and I had already been hearing, several other bishops before. So, and then he turned out to be, not really taking that so literally. It was just a wake-up call, perhaps. But I think their voice to the people in the pew is huge. How they lead us, and then I'm thinking how they're leading all the leaders of the small parish, how they're encouraging or discouraging by their way of speaking is pretty huge. So that's what I'm looking for. I didn't get to make it on the 14th. I wish I had, but I think I want to go and hear the bishop and encourage that we're really doing what we're doing. I don't know.
So I'll pass this to someone who was at the convention, but just reading his script from his talk at the convention was really, really, I'll say uplifting.
Yeah.
But I'll pass the mic to someone who was actually there.
Yeah, so I would say, he didn't preach at his consecration. He probably was thinking about other things. And so traditionally, the bishop will invite someone to preach. But he did preach at convention and used that as a time to kind of share what he's thinking about. So if you can go back and watch the YouTube of that Eucharist yesterday, that'll give you a kind of a clear idea of where he is now. It's maybe where he won't be in a year.
What?
Gary's question, I think that we'll begin to get a view of his administration based on. Thanks, Mike. We'll begin to get a view of his administration based on the people he hires. He has important hiring decisions to make and appointments to make. And while those that hiring and those appointments don't effectively impact people in our pews, they certainly have a strong impact on how the bishop deals with parishes and intervening with parishes and missions that have problems. They have a strong impact on how the diocese deals with its property and how effective we are in doing that. And so, like any, executive, his view of things is going to be reflected through the people that he engages. And that's what I'm going to be looking at.
Search committee, do they actually just put out an announcement and people respond, or do they actually get on the phone and call somebody?
It's a little bit of both. So a little bit of both, but when you put that profile out, in effect, that is like posting a job. And then we ask for folks who may want to recommend someone or others. So So the answer to your question is yes, a little bit of both.
Yes, two things I'd just like to start off saying thank you. I feel like my dad was a pastor growing up. I'm from South Florida. We're Haitian. And so I think he went to seminary school, but he had he was able to translate faith into the Haitian community by translating, especially for a lot of new immigrants. And so I think being a pastor's kid, getting caught up in the tedium of the medium of attending funeral services and just all the things. Sorry, Spirit makes me choke up all the time. I love it. Yeah, and so I always had questions about what life in other. So seeing the whole breakdown of terms and vocabulary and the history is kind of I guess that missing piece in my life that I feel like was brought to me today. And from what I'm hearing about the bishop, the Diocese of Olympia, it's my hope would be that what I've heard in especially in the military chaplains kind of environment, the ministry of presence, and it's this day and age where we're talking a lot about mental health and therapy and how therapists need to see therapists. It seems that Reverend Phil LaBelle would be the priest to the priesthood, having that mind for the people, keeping the presence and the prayer for those leaders in a way, servant leaders, and kind of aggregating all the metadata of what's happening in the parishes so that he can kind of petition in a holy, highest way, good of all for everybody. What the heart, because each of us today as part of the church are the fingers and toenails and everything. But my second part would be, yes, where could we find the Eucharistic, I guess, sermon of Phil LaBelle yesterday?
Yeah, there's a website for you.
I think it's if you go to the diocesan website, you'll see it there. And we can get you the website without question. You taking over?
You want to wrap it up?
No, that's what you want.
Well, then that gives me the chance just to really say thank you to Mike and Eleanor and Tieran and Diana and everyone who helped. A lot of work. Thank you very much.